Welcome back to Weapon Select, where we're going to be talking about a couple of old friends today. So those of you who have been around a while know that I was a Tentatek Splattershot main, or a T-Tech player, for a long time in Splatoon 2. In that game, it had Splat Bomb like it does now, but it also had Inkjet. And the differences in the playstyle are pretty dramatic because of the difference in the special. Inkjet was a special that you could use from the front lines. You just had to hide behind a piece of cover and make sure that your landing was safe, but as soon as you got up, you would be able to use it to clear out backliners from positions that they were taking and make the way clear for other people, and just generally, force the enemy team back. Strikes are not anywhere near the same utility. While you do still use them to clear a lot of those same kinds of places, an Inkjet does that from, down here, while a Tri-Strike does that from, back here. So that difference in positioning, of course, means that even though this is one of the most aggressive weapon kits that you can put together in the game with a combination of a main weapon and a sub-weapon, it also doesn't play that way a lot of the time. It has the potential to go in and take fights and outplay in the way that any frontline weapon does. It's got one of the most powerful bombs, arguably the most powerful bomb for doing that, to assist it. And it has a really good rate of fire. It can paint its way in, so it's not super reliant on teammates to get it away towards the enemy team. It can shark, but it can also, paint and stall for a little while. There's a lot of potential with that kit, but when you have to back up to use your special, it's always going to force you to play a little bit less aggressively. And so you can sometimes see, a T-Tech player just kind of playing like how we used to think that the Splattershot Junior should be played, where you just sit back and you throw bombs, and that's how you have impact. And that, synergizes pretty well with the special, actually, because you can get the most ridiculous of combos by using the bomb, tri-strike, 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 bomb idea. Look at how much of this space got nuked. Look at how little space the enemy team had to work with there. And that's kind of using a single ink tank. Not exactly, because technically what's happening is I'm throwing a bomb, refreshing the ink tank with the special, and then throwing another bomb on the newly filled ink tank. But, you don't have to get more resources to do that. As soon as you can throw the first bomb, you can do that combo. So it's a weapon that incentivizes sitting back and playing really passively and playing like a paint support, while also giving you the tools to go in and play really aggressively. And it gets really nuanced when you want this versus when you want some other short-range shooter, because this weapon is very similar as well to the Neo Splash. The Neo Splash is just Suction Bomb and Splash-O-Matic, but same special, and, it's very similar range. It's also got a lethal bomb, but the difference here is that the Splattershot has a faster time to kill, and the Splat Bomb is better for aggressive fighting, while the Suction Bomb is better for passive painting, for kind of more passive zone control, because it has a longer fuse time, which means it controls that space for longer, but also that it's easier to avoid. So, for example, if I'm trying to engage on someone and I want to cut off their options, I want a Splat Bomb for that, because now they don't have any way out, and they can't just, cross this bomb up easily and get to the other side of it to avoid it. A lot of the time, they just kind of have to deal with it being there, and they have to let it force their movement. Whereas with the Suction Bomb, because they have an extra second on the fuse timer, they can just decide, oh, well, I don't want to be on this side of the bomb, I want to be on this side of the bomb, and swim to the other side of it, and they can get away with that. So, while, again, very, very similar, this is by far the more aggressive of the two options. So, if you want a weapon that's going to be able to switch into Slayer mode, this is the one that you go with. of the strike weapons. Obviously, you've also got the V bucket to consider, which is one of the reasons we're not seeing these as much in competitive play. But Kyo has been swapping onto this from time to time and has been singing its praises in tweets to try and get people on board. Whether that actually pans out in the way that the results go in competitive play, or whether he just really likes the weapon and it kind of suits the niche that he needs in his team, hard to say. But it's not a bad weapon. It will never be a bad weapon. It will be like B tier at worst, basically all of the time. And that's one really nice thing about this. This is a fantastic weapon for beginners to learn the game with, because it teaches you a lot of the mechanics that you need to play at speed. You do need to learn to aim to use this thing, but it gives you so many tools that lets you play basically any play style you want. You can sit back and throw bombs and play from really far back if you want to get used to that before you're feeling comfortable going in and actually taking fights. It teaches you the importance of positioning with your special and how to aim this unique thing. And so there's a lot of strategy involved, a lot of skill expression involved in setting up traps and figuring out how to get people stuck. And displacement. There's so many ideas that this helps with. And it's also not a paint liability. You will be totally fine with this as like a primary painter on a team if that's what you want them to be doing. It's going to be outpainted slightly by some other options right now. Again, like the way the metagame is right now, anything that's solid is probably slightly outclassed by something else, but it's still totally playable and will still get wins. And it depends way more on player skill for, I'd say, like maybe the top half or so of the weapons in the game than it does on like the raw power that distinguishes one tier of weapon from another tier. So the T-Tech will always be relevant. It will always be something you have to respect on the enemy team, and it's something that has a lot of niche use cases, but it's not something that's like the driving factor in the meta right now. You basically play this differently depending on what your team comp has. It's really hard to just say, this is an aggressive weapon, because it can be, but it also gets beat by like a 52 gal, for example. 52 outranges it and has a faster kill time. So if that's all you're using it for, you're going to need to play a lot more passively and use your bombs and rattle those against the splash walls that get put out. And only once the splash wall is down do you really want to go in, and you only want to go in if you know you can get in range and stay on top of them, and that their faster kill time isn't going to be a factor in whether you win or lose the fight. There are a lot of ifs there, and you need to plan around those relative strengths of that weapon. The 52 isn't as good at painting. It doesn't have quite the same impact with either of its specials most of the time. They're definitely labbing out screen and figuring out how to make it more impactful. But I haven't really been able to try it out too much because I only feel comfortable using that weapon in scrims where people can opt out of it. So I don't have as much to weigh in on that about just yet. But the ability to, throw these and have powerful displacement abilities that can get people out of position, that's something that you can play around, and then you can just kind of paint for that. You can play for the bombs and the bomb support. You can play for a number of different win conditions. And again, it just depends on what your team needs of you. You really can't put one playstyle to this weapon. It's one of those things where everyone's going to play it a little bit differently, and it depends heavily on what tools the weapon has that your team needs right at that moment. I'm going to play this on tower control. This is the mode where I tend to get the most value out of tri-strikes, because tri-strikes are a GG special. They're a special where if you just throw them at the tower at the end of the game and you have the lead, it's basically impossible for the enemy team to stay on for a certain amount of time. And as soon as any one of your teammates gets on, which they can do using the smoke screen of the tri-strikes, they just end the game right then and there. It's very, very difficult to beat that strategy, even in a solo queue environment where it's maybe not even as well coordinated, let alone in a coordinated environment where everyone knows that that's the plan. All right, let's see what we got here. Okay, we're going to need to provide a lot of paint for our team. 96 plus range blaster, that's not a ton of paint, The bucket can paint, but it's generally going to paint in the enemy team. And on the other side, we've got a Zap and a T-Tech. That's the Octoshot replica. So between the two of them, they're going to have a lot, and I'm going to need to do some of this just to support my team here. So I'm going to be playing a little bit more of the supportive playstyle here, but if this guy steps out of line, we miss every shot, and my teammate gets them anyway. So they better watch out. Just going to throw these so that we can hopefully continue to ride through checkpoint. And we're throwing the bomb there to keep the bucket off our team. I'm fine taking that trade. Tower keeps moving in spite of it. Always take trades when you like the status quo, when you like the way things are, especially if you're not the objective player at the moment. And it's not like we suffered too much from the paint deficit in the meantime. We already had it all pretty covered. Oh, there's someone over here. And maybe one day I'll start hitting my shots on them, and then we'll have a pretty good match against them. There. That right there is quintessential T-Tech. Throw a bomb, that forces them into a position they don't want to be in, and then you just have a really fast kill time that makes that painful for them. Since we're playing a little bit more of a supportive role here, I'm going to be playing more on the objective. I'm going to be letting my teammates go forward. They have weapons that are more specialized for helping them push up, and especially for the range blaster, hit around that. 96 is opted to let me move up instead. So we're going to hop up and we're going to take the bomb, try to put it to good use. We protect the objective there, because it doesn't matter how far forward we get if somebody's getting past us to the objective, and we win the game. You can just hear from the conversation I'm having, look at the paint, how little was played in our side and how much was played in theirs. That was really good. You can hear in the way that I'm talking about this, like, I'm deciding, what does my team need right now? Do we need the paint support? Well, no, we've got the whole map painted. So do I want to shift on to the aggressive side? Well, nobody's playing the objective right now, so I'll play the objective. But once the objective got played, the only thing that was left to do was to push the enemy team back, was to, play more aggressively. And so that was when I pushed up. If a fight happens, of course, I'm going to be quick to go and help my teammates with that, because I can move to it quickly, and I have that really good kill time. But one thing I'm probably not going to be doing is just hard engaging on the front line, because there are so many things in the metagame right now that would outrange me, that would splat me a little bit faster. You don't want to be pushing against the Nautilus that has charge, oftentimes even if they are in range. Because, for one thing, they do have the range advantage, but for another, just really, really fast shot velocity, very fast kill time. It's pretty hard to tackle one of those, except in between charge, when maybe they're not looking at you or something. It's much more of the Slayer archetype than it is the Skirmisher archetype. It doesn't really have anything to protect itself, except for maybe the threat of a rolled splat bomb splatting someone and forcing them to move instead of shoot at you. That's about the best you've got. It's not the same as having really long range. It's not the same as having the ability to hit over the top of ledges. It's not the same as having a splash wall. So if I were to have to 1v1 any of the other weapons that were on my team in that game, I don't expect to come out on top of those. I would have to surprise them. I would have to get on top of them while they're looking someplace else. So you're not going to try to play the role of primary initiator, except by making big set plays, like I'm throwing a splat bomb that will force someone out of position and that allows me to run at them. Or I'm nuking an entire area with the tri-strikes and that's what's getting me or my teammates in, and then we can go fight. It's a lot more, if you're used to Splatoon 2, it's a lot more of a K-shot than it is of a T-Tech. There is no real equivalence to the Splatoon 2 T-Tech, where it's an aggressive weapon with an aggressive sub that also has an aggressive special. None of the splatter shots, not even a lot of the short-range shooters really have that going for them. There really isn't much that is the same as that playstyle. It's a lot more of the get your special first, then go in. Get an advantage first, then go in. See an opponent who's not looking at you and then go in. Not, I can bully you out of position with my weapon. Because your weapon does get bullied by anything with longer range, and there's a lot that has longer range than it. And there are a lot of other ways to mitigate your advantage, your fast kill time as well, if you're not careful about it. So you gotta find what your niche is, and then play to that. Next up, another blast from the past. We are going to not blast. I guess that's false advertising. We're talking about the Enperry Dualies, which are here somewhere. I promise. Enperry Dualies in Splatoon 2 were another kit that was one of the most aggressive weapons in the entire game. This is a weapon that didn't care as much about enemy ink. It has a curling bomb that can just let it skate right through it. And then even if it ends up on a spot that's not painted, it can just dodge roll through it. So there's less that is in between you and your opponents with this weapon than there is with most others. You don't have to care as much about what's in the way. But unlike the Sploosh, this has a little bit of range to it. And it still has a decently fast time to splat. And in Splatoon 2, it had Inkjet. And so, once again, same thing with the Splatoon 2 Tentatek Splattershot. It was a weapon that allowed you to play really aggressive with every aspect of the kit. This is a weapon that just let top teams play as fast as they wanted to. They could run someone in and just beat the enemy team, dropping into mid, because the enemy team got there a little bit slower than this weapon did. And so this weapon was already waiting for them on the other side of the cover, and would get a pick before anyone even really knew it was there unless they were checking the map. And of course, at top level, everyone's going to be checking the map, but there's always the threat that that could happen because they get out so fast, and they can snowball really fast off this too. One of the things that FLC talks about that I remember from a lecture of his is that when you get an advantage, you need to get in their base. You need to get as much space as possible, because there are not really great flank routes on the maps that are in this game. You've got some maps that are just really, like, narrow hallways. And as soon as the bottleneck is unclogged, even for a second, you've got to be getting someone through that and securing space, because otherwise they can just lock it down with, like, a single retreating player. You don't get anywhere, and you haven't gained an advantage from it. And so the example that FLC used in that instance was you need to get the 52 gal in their base. You just need to get it there as quickly as you possibly can, and everyone else can, clean up the turf that they leave behind them later once they're in control of that area and they're trying to take more, defensive positions. But you need to lay claim to that space first, and this is the kind of weapon that you use to do that. This is your Vanguard. This is the weapon that goes out in front and takes care of collecting that space once your team has an advantage, but also in giving yourself the opportunity to get that space by creating an advantage for themselves. The problem is, in this game, instead of giving it Inkjet, which is a phenomenal pairing with it, that gave it the ability to get up over the top of ledges and dislodge backline weapons, in addition to dealing with whatever was on the ground, something that was just a battering ram you could throw at basically any defensive fortification that would find a way through. It has splashdown, and if you just get underneath here and do this in front of an E-leader, you're getting sniped. So once again, the kit synergy is not quite there in the way that it was in the previous game, and that's why it's seeing so much less play. For whatever reason, this weapon has more points that it needs for special than the vanilla dualies, which gets Crab Tank. One of the most dominant specials in the game for a very long time, 190p. A special that is kind of likely to just get you shot out of the air if you're not really careful with it, and only covers a little bit of space for a very short amount of time, 200p. It doesn't make any sense. There's very, very little reason to run Enperry's over Splat Dualies in current meta. The difference that you're playing it for would be Curling Bomb versus Suction Bomb. And there are advantages that the Curling Bomb has, for sure, in mobility, in your ability to get through the enemy side of the map, to move up and take space faster. But you're sacrificing way, way more in Crab Tank versus Splashdown to get that. And if you want a Curling Bomb frontliner, right now, 52 Deco is a really popular choice, and will get you pretty much that same impact. So It's not a really popular weapon competitively right now, but it does have a lot of history to it. For those who don't know, when you dodge roll with dualies, you can see your reticle goes from 2 reticles to 1, so your shots are going to be way more accurate. If I'm only hitting with one of the reticles in 2 reticle mode, I'm doing half DPS, but it's actually worse than that because your turret mode fire rate is actually faster as well. So you have a much, much better time to kill with the dodge rolls than you do with the double reticle. A lot of newer players will try to use the double reticle to offset their weaker aim. I would probably, if you're probably going to try and actually stick to the dualies, I would try to get used to dodge rolling in fights, even if it's worse at first, because it'll be better in the long run. One of the big things that you need to learn with dualies in particular that's unique from a lot of mechanics for other weapons is you really need to learn and internalize the distance that your dodge roll travels and how that's going to affect your aim. This is a weapon class that's very difficult to play on sticks if you're planning on implementing the dodge rolls at all, because trying to follow your dodge roll with the sticks as opposed to the motion aim, you either get it set up ahead of time and then do the dodge roll, or you're just losing some of the utility of the weapon. Like, if I dodge roll forward and then realize there's someone to my back left, having to turn slowly to get to them, not great. Being able to just snap to them right away, much better. You get so much more out of the dualies with the ability to snap quickly with your movement, or with your aim. So that it's something that it might be challenging for people who are sticks only to take advantage of this. But even if you're not using motion controls, one thing you can do is learn, okay, if I dodge roll to the left, will my reticle be on the target? Yes. That's about the distance off that you can be to just not move your aim and get there. And that would be a way that you can set yourself up so that you don't have to be doing as much snapping, as much moving in the middle of your dodge rolls. This isn't like Tetras. You are not going to be firing shots while you dodge roll, so you don't have to worry about all of the time that you're spending in the middle of the roll getting your aim on. You just need to make sure that it's set by the time you get there. So this is way, way less aim intensive than Tetra Dualies, in that Tetra Dualies you actually benefit from being able to keep your reticle locked on them in the middle of the dodge roll, from one part of the dodge roll to another, because you are actively firing shots the whole time. So with Tetras, you actually want to be able to do this, where you are keeping the reticle on them the entire time. Not so with anything in the other Dualies categories. This is all you need to be able to do. I guess it's a little bit more aim intensive with the Dualie Squelchers in that you can be jump teching, but still way less aim intensive. But again, you got to get used to the distance that you're going to travel with the dodge roll and be ready to adjust your aim according to that. And that takes a little bit of visualization, a little bit of learning before that feels comfortable. A lot of the time you're just going to kind of do one of these and be like, oh, I feel silly now. Another thing that's really important to recognize about these that's different from the Tetras is you only have 2 rolls, and you really need to be careful about how you spend those, because what experienced players are going to do is they're just going to wait for your rolls to be done where you're stuck in this state. I'm mashing the button the whole time as I'm doing this. But you see there is a pause in the middle there. That pause is more than long enough for a lot of weapons in the game to just splat you, even if they haven't hit you already. You need to not get stuck in that state when you're next to, in range of, an opponent. So a dodge roll is something you use very sparingly, because once you use the second one, you're in that state where, unless you're behind cover, you might as well be down. And that's something that you always have to be playing around. So typically, if I engage, I'm only going to use 1 dodge roll to get myself in turret mode, and then maybe the second one if I need to continue the fight, if I need to throw their aim off, I might just wait in turret mode on the first one, and then wait out that cooldown so that I can then double dodge roll after the first one. That's something you can sometimes do to extend the amount of time you have. But you're going to have to wait at some point, and if you end up in an engagement where you've used the second one and you still need to move, that's going to be it, and that's a pretty common situation. So you got to use those sparingly. Something that Jared has been doing a lot, and Jared has a great guide on the Splat Dualies, the vanilla Splat Dualies, that you should definitely go check out, is Jared utilizes a lot of jumping. Jared will do a lot of this and aim these jump shots before actually going in. Jumping with a lot of weapons is a really big commitment, because with most weapons, if you are in the air, you're committed to that arc. You're committed to wherever it is that you're landing pretty early on. You can't move very far. Like, yes, I can reverse directions a little bit, but like in the grand scheme of things, I'm not moving very much by doing this. This is very low mobility. But dualies don't care about that because they have dodge rolls. I can just do this and cancel this jump whenever I want and get back down to the ground very quickly. And you can see very easily when I do this from high ground, you fall significantly faster when you dodge roll. So you can even put yourself way up in the air here, but then do this whenever you want and juke someone as they try to like aim their charger laser at you or something. It's going to take an extra layer of reads for that charger to really be able to figure out where they need to put their shot before you zip around, use that burst movement to get around their aim and maybe make them miss. So there are definitely some tools that you have to conserve those dodge rolls, and it does take a little bit of practice to get used to jumping instead of dodge rolling, because it's very easy if you're trying to shoot to accidentally just dodge roll instead of jumping, because you're trying to shoot right away, so you have to jump and then shoot. But it extends your range slightly to be jumping. Very, very slightly, but it's something that can make a difference in like a very close matchup range-wise. You get a little bit of chip damage, and then you tap them a couple times or something, you think you've got an opportunity, then you can commit to it. That's not to say that you can't also just, shark in and insta-delete someone like that, and that'll catch someone off guard for sure. But these are all options that you can use in that neutral situation so that you're not just kind of like dodge rolling forward and just barely getting in range or even getting out of range and then being stuck and not being able to retreat. There are a lot of ways that you can get yourself stuck with this weapon that you wouldn't get yourself stuck with on a shooter, and those are some ways to mitigate it. All right. Lots of backline weapons here. I'm just going to go and immediately start trying to target one of them. I'm going to get in here and see if they notice this. And it looks like the charger has in fact noticed, and they're aiming at me. So that at least takes pressure off one of my teammates for a while. I can get some shots in there, and I'm just going to be a pain in this charger's butt for a little while. Again, I'm getting out of there before they actually have the ability to hit me, but I'm not letting them stay there. Since they didn't continually watch me, we just get to go back around and do this. And now we've cleared a couple of challenges from my teammates as they try to push the tower. So this is looking really good so far. We've got the charger up there. So they know that someone's down here, but they don't know where yet, and they didn't fully check it. Unfortunately, I didn't get in range, and I really should have just used my splashdown at some point there, because at least it would have forced them to move and maybe lose their charge. But even so, just off of those first couple of picks, we ended up being able to get to 36, which is pretty solid. I'm not going to push this because the E-Leader and the Hydra both have angles on the right, but we might be able to catch this player because they're stuck down here. Not much they can do. The only thing they could have done was melee me, so that's a faster kill time. You are not paying attention at all. We don't really need to splat them here, and in fact, we're probably going to need to back up because we're damaged and we don't want to get splatted. They are so one. Okay, here we go. Now we're just going to throw that out there, see if they shoot at it. There we go. Once they, use their flick, I have time to get away. I just don't want to be moving at the same time that they're flicking at me. so that I accidentally coincide with it. I was hoping that would reach a little bit further and hit the Hydra. I wasn't really thinking about how that special actually works. I'm not used to using triple splashdown. So I was thinking, oh, this is going to threaten the Hydra, but not really. Not in the slightest, actually. Okay. So we're going to move up to force them to shoot at me instead of shooting at my teammates and me at the same time. And then back up. This player is way too close. And I should have this, but my aim is bad. Teammate gets it. Nice. You can see there how, at the end of that engagement, I was kind of getting stuck in my dodge roll. I'd used both of the rolls, but wasn't really much I was going to be able to do to move out of that. The Charger see me there? In the competitive context, I wouldn't have stayed where I did, but these guys have been unaware enough of this that I totally trusted them to miss. Unfortunate that I just whiffed those shots. That's another danger of dodge rolling, that on a shooter, I might have been able to keep my distance from the Flingza so that it didn't get in melee range. But on the dualies, once I dodge rolled once, I was going to be limited in my movement once, I could only get so far away from it. So I might end up actually getting stuck too close to them, using them that way. We'll take that. Splashdown probably would have been better because it would have cleared the area more decisively, but all we really need to do is keep the backliners off my team, and we should be able to just win fights. We've been able to do that reliably so far. Okay, nice. It looks like we actually bumped them with the curling bomb because we got an assist for that. The Wiper isn't going to be able to splat me quickly enough to just break my splashdown there on reaction. Almost got the Wiper that time. So I trusted just kind of throwing the splashdown up there. Pretty successful game. Granted, it depended heavily on the backliners being a little bit less aware of me than I'm used to in a competitive context. A lot of the time, you don't get to sneak up on them that easily. A lot of the time, they don't just leave their back turned to you. They spot warning signs like curling bombs, and they aim that shot at you and stop you from getting that angle. But if they give it to you, you're one of the best weapons to take advantage of it. So that's a solid one. Lastly, we have a very popular weapon. One that you're going to see a lot in solo queue. But one that, at least in the West, has not been very popular competitively. Much more so in Japan. You'll see top Japanese players putting this on par with other high tiers. Like, they'll put this up in the same kind of tier that they put a Splattershot. It's something that I've been very curious about for some time, like why that's the case and like what they see in it that we don't. What potential there is or isn't in it, who I think is actually right about that. But generally in the West, this has been considered pretty weak. Now, to be clear, this main weapon at close range is arguably one of the most powerful in the entire game. These dodge rolls are fast enough, especially on Splatoon netcode, that you can basically classify them as short-range teleports. There's not really tracking these unless you have the hardest of reads on an opponent, not just what direction they're going to go, but when they're going to go there. It's something you're just never going to be able to rely on unless you're so much better than that opponent already that it doesn't matter. And the DPS that these weapons do is insane in turret mode. If there is a Dapples on the enemy Rainmaker team, you would better have something like a Sploosh, or you're just not getting the Rainmaker pop at the beginning of the game. You might as well go and pay for special instead. It's really, really, really fast. And one of the things that makes this really popular early on is that because of the dual reticle thing here, I can be off a little bit in my aim and still hit some of my shots. And because it's a relatively fast fire rate, and because it does so much damage, it's a 3-shot, I don't even necessarily need to have my aim on perfectly, and I still do significant damage, and I eventually get the splat, even just by walking around like this. So this is something that you see a lot of newer players gravitating toward for that reason. The problem that eventually ends up making this less viable is the range. So a Splattershot can hit this target from here. Dapples cannot. So just to demonstrate, it's fall off from that range, but you're doing damage, and you're never going to do damage with this thing. You have to get significantly closer. It's maybe like 2 lines. Yeah, 2 lines is where you start getting fall off. And that range difference is big enough that a lot of weapons can kind of just wall it out. So Splattershot, you can kind of use your dodge rolls to compensate for that, because once you start getting into their range, now you can do something like this, and now you're there, and you've thrown their aim off the whole time that you were approaching. So that matchup is a little bit better for you, but something like a 52 gal with a wall up, forget about it. Like, you're not getting to that 52 before they're going to laser you. You really need to find another way around, you need to shark them, you need someone to deal with the wall and distract them in order for you to get the pick there. And there are a lot of midline weapons that are in the meta, especially right now, that will just eat this thing alive if it tries to swim at them through one of the few predictable ways that it has to go. One way that this weapon can try to offset that is with its kit. It can use the torpedo to try and distract a player so that they have to shoot the torpedo first, and then during the time that they're shooting the torpedo down, you go in and try to confirm the splat. That's not super reliable against players with better aim, because they will just hit the torpedo while backing up, so creating more space still, and then by the time you're in range, they've still been hitting you already. But it's an option, and it's not something to discount if you have a little bit more distance on them already, if you have some kind of advantage. You also have the ability to do stuff like roll the torpedoes to get a little bit of extra chip if, like, you hit them twice and you just need one more. Well, okay. 1, 2. And you just get something like that from a longer range. That might be something that helps you confirm a splat. This is also really powerful for being a poking tool on a short-range weapon. It's something that this weapon sorely needs to be able to space out in neutral and find a way in a situation where they just don't have some inherent advantage already. Because sometimes you are just going to be in a position where the enemy team can hold one of 2 different choke points. You can't get through either of them, and if you don't have a ranged option that can hit them from further away to at least bother them, you're never going to create that opportunity for yourself. So it's something that the weapon sorely needs, and it's something that was really, really good about the clear Dapple Dualies kit that also had Torpedo in Splatoon 2. Unfortunately, this weapon also has the same problem that the Clapples had, as we called them, in Splatoon 2, which is that Clapples had Splashdown, and this weapon has Reef Slider, which is a slightly better version of Splashdown, debatably. There are some people who actually prefer to have Splashdown back. It's an open question among, like, Tetris players, and they're basically the only ones who care. This weapon... Reef Slider is very weird in this game in that it has exactly one high-level competitive use case, which is cheesing the splat zone. There are some splat zones that are small enough that this explosion radius right here will cover enough of them to flip them or cap them. And on those zones, this is really, really annoying to deal with, because all this player has to do is get that special, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're not going to be able to keep the zone long enough to KO. Now, you might splat this player afterward and then have their team wiped and be able to lock them out harder and, be able to go from there. But if it's, one of those clutch up or lose the game situations, it's a lot easier to clutch up when all you have to do is aim this thing at the correct corner of mid than it is to make a strong push against a high-level competitive team. So That's an option that you'll always have, that will always have that niche in zones. Now, is this the weapon I would play for that niche? Maybe not. It's not the weapon that's going to play exclusively to that anyway, out of the weapons that we have available. There are others that are better at farming it, Reef Deco, for example. But this is a weapon that has a little bit of fighting capability, a little bit of ability to shark, maybe some poke with the torpedoes. And if any of that is of interest, then there might be a niche somewhere, but it is very, very niche. It's not something you're really going to see at top levels of play outside of... I mean, there was Unidon who ran it in Worlds. You might see some of it in Japan, but if you're watching Western tournaments, they just never use this thing. They would prefer, if they want dualies with Reef Slider, there are Tetra Dualies, which have way more range, which have the ability to shoot in between their shots, which have 4 dodge rolls. Lots of advantages there that offset the DPS disadvantage. And Autobomb is damage that you can't stop and still gives you information, while torpedoes can be shot down, and at high levels, torpedoes often just kind of never detonate because the players have such good aim and they're so good at point at circular thing and click button that the torpedo often just doesn't reach its destination unless you're aiming it at like a dynamo or something. So just a lot more reliable traits from the Tetra Dualies there that offset the one disadvantage, which is the DPS and the faster dodge roll speed. Because even the faster dodge roll speed doesn't matter as much for that weapon when you were firing in between shots, so it's not even changing the window at which you can fire. All it's changing is how easy it is to track the dodge rolls and follow the player across the screen with your aim. Pretty solid comp to support this. They've got a lot of range. Then we've got Blaster, which is generally pretty easy to make miss. We're probably going to take some indirect damage from them, but it'll be really hard for them to land direct because of our dodge rolls. And then Tri-Slosher, we don't want to be messing with too much. It's pretty easy for those to trade. We're going to need to be pretty precise to get the DPS off before they're able to get us. Unfortunate there that we weren't really able to help. If we had recognized where they were a little bit faster, I probably could have just taken cover and been okay. But me going down and let my teammate get the splat, and I'm sure if I hadn't gone in, my teammate just would have been the first one splatted and would have gone down. You can see there, like, that's how you can fight a weapon that has a range advantage on it. You just hit it before it knows you're there, and your DPS is fast enough that it doesn't really matter. That you don't have the range, they never saw you in the first place. There, I was a little bit in too deep. Any short-range weapon, hyper short-range weapon like this, needs to be playing around cover a lot, which means that it's a little bit harder for it to move forward because it doesn't want to move forward into areas where it doesn't have that cover. A longer-range weapon can fight sooner because it doesn't have to get as close to something, which means that it can be a little bit further out of cover and still be able to hit you. This thing, you kind of just need it right away. Let's see here, we're being really disruptive in the enemy base. There was the advantage of the aim RNG, of the dual reticle mode. I couldn't tell exactly where the player was, and I only needed like a shot, so I just switched to dual reticle mode, and now I was hitting a wider stretch. I was kind of just widening my aim artificially. There again is a fight that only works because I have faster DPS. We're catching a lot of people who aren't really looking at us, so that's helpful. I'm going to go and use this to clear this, because I'm invincible, and that can help me cross some space sometimes. I'm okay with them moving closer to me. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. I wanted them to not move further away, and that was why I played that the way that I did. And use this to harass the backliner up there. We can't do that for too long because we don't have the range to hold that position ourselves, but we can still spend some time getting in their way. you can see how in their base I'm gravitating toward being like right under this ledge. The angles that's just really hard for them to align their aim with. Hopefully this doesn't see me. Good, they were aiming the other way. So we just get free shots. Easy peasy. We don't want to trade with the Tri-Slosher there, so we're just going to rat our way over here. Player goes down. Played it pretty sloppily, honestly, and it doesn't matter. They had to drop, which means they're going to go to the sponge, and they're not going to make it, because I'm going to cut them off. Throw that up there, and then one of the things you can do is use the torpedo to make them look someplace other than where you are going, so that even if you're trying to cross an area that they could just shoot at you from, because they looked up to look at the torpedo, now they aren't looking at you. So they literally just don't see you because they turned their camera upward, and that cuts their peripheral vision a bit. I'll demonstrate that in the lobby over here. I've done that in videos before, but when you look up or down, it cuts your ability to see left and right. You just see fewer targets, and so putting the torpedo up there when they don't know exactly where the torpedo came from, and then following in, knowing that they're looking up instead of having a good camera angle to see you coming, that can be something that helps you close distance. So notice, here's what I can see. Here's how many dummies I can see from here. If I look up, I can't quite see as many of them, can't quite see them as well. And notice how from here, I can see this ramp area on the left. When I look up, that ramp area goes away. So imagine there is a Dapple Dualies that's standing right here. Well, torpedo goes up, I aim at this. I don't see the Dapples until they're in range of me, until they're like hitting me from like right here. So that's kind of the effect you're trying to create. You throw this, get them to look, and then go in for the pick while they're looking. And that can be something that, against someone who's not used to this matchup, might catch them off guard. Against more experienced competitive players, again, they probably just create distance, shoot the torpedo, recognize that you don't have a ton of ink left in your tank anymore, and just stay far enough away that they can hit you and you still can't hit them. But that's one of the ideas, and that was something that I was able to use in a couple of places in that match. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Hope that was helpful, and we'll be doing something else next. I don't know. I thought I might do the Chargers today, but I was just feeling in a dually kind of mood, so that's what I did. Who knows which weapons we'll play next? It's a mystery. It's okay. Bye.